So I think one of the first things that a startup business should think about are its terms and conditions and its privacy policy. Because the terms and conditions on your website govern your relationship with your customer. And the privacy policy governs what you can do with the information that you gather from your customer. So the terms and conditions, a lot of folks are going to be tempted just to go out to one of the big websites, for example, to Amazon.com or something like that, and grab their terms and conditions and just make a copy of those and stick them on their website. The problem with that, of course, is that the terms and conditions are unique to the geographic location where the company is, the kinds of customers that the company has, the kinds of products that the company is going to sell. And so each of these things can't just be reproduced without thinking through who your underlying customer is and what it is you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's important that the startup business take a good look at those issues. Some things that are probably more important than others on those lists are things like governing law. Invariably, a dispute's going to happen. In the event that it bubbles over into a lawsuit, where do you want that lawsuit? Do you want to leave that blank and take a chance that the lawsuit is going to be heard where the customer is? Do you want to put in choice of law and venue language that makes sure that if the customer decides to get aggressive with you, that they have to come to your home jurisdiction to do that? What you certainly don't want to do is to put in language where Amazon wants to be sued, because chances of you being where Amazon is are pretty slim, right? And so those are sorts of things that on the terms and conditions side that are important. Another thing with terms and conditions that's very important are limitations of liability. Oftentimes, website owners are starting a new business, and they may be selling their own services. And in that case, you have total control over the quality, I suppose. But if you're reselling other people's stuff and something happens, and the product's no good, or the product does harm or causes damage, you want to make sure that you have reasonable limitations of liability in place, so that you don't end up paying for all sorts of consequential damages, other problems that maybe you didn't foresee were going to happen. And so those sorts of issues can be dealt with in an appropriate terms and conditions. The other primary document on the website is the privacy policy. And again, that governs what you can do with the information about your customer that you get from the customer. Now, there's a couple of different kinds of information. The first primary kind of information is what we would consider to be anonymous information. What is the IP address that they're using? The IP address will tell you all kinds of things, like where they're coming from and those sorts of things. How many pages did they view? What pages did they view? Those sorts of things. That information can be used in the aggregate, and you can look at that information, find out essentially where your customers are coming from, what they're interested in, and how to build a better website experience. And those things are usually not tied to personally identifiable information. So we need to deal with that category of privacy in the privacy statement. The other kind is the personally identifiable information: name, address, email, billing information. And again, with a privacy statement in place, it's important to have one of those so that you handle that information correctly, so that you are able to use the information in a way that you want to use that information, and so that there's predictability for the consumer. The government gets a little unhappy when consumers are surprised when their email address is sold to somebody else. And so those sorts of things you have to have in place really at the beginning. I get this question a lot. Why should I put the privacy statement in place? I don't have any customers. Is that something that I can defer? Well, if you don't have a privacy statement in place, the presumption is going to be that the consumer is going to be protected to the full extent of the law, and also not having a disclosure in place violates the law in some jurisdictions. But more importantly, what you don't want to do is to have no privacy statement in place, and then 6 months into it, when you have a group of customers, put one in place, and then you have two sets of data, one that you can handle one way and one that you can handle another way, and it's nearly impossible to get those two sets of data merged back together, and that's where you run into compliance issues. So again, privacy statement, very important really from the beginning that you have that in place. And again, you may or may not want to go out and grab another big company's privacy statement, because that may not be the jurisdiction that you're in. They may have a more restrictive law instead of the happier law that your state may have. So again, it's just not something that you can go out and block and copy and hope for the best.